Before I start, it's important for all of you who've never done this to have a sense of the little drama and beauty, and I don't mean drama in the drama way, but the little beautiful thing that unfolds the week before. So here's how it went this week. In this week of sadness and loss and worry that we all had, last Sunday Barb said to me, well, would you like to read one of the sermons from the Church of the Larger Community? And I agreed. But in a moment of what I can only describe as absolute foolishness, I said, must have been high blood sugar or something, well, how about if I write one? I have this thing I've been thinking on and I would like to do this. I have no idea how to write a sermon, but it is based on a book that has informed my work as a nurse practitioner. So in the course of this week, very quickly, even Sunday morning, Hank has his part covered. Linda came up with the absolute beautiful songs, just like that, because I was like, songs, I wouldn't know how to pick songs. I would have had to read the whole hymnal in the course of this week. Nancy, number one, said, do you want me to take care of the meditation? I was like, oh, yes, that's good. And then Barb just makes this all seem as if it's effortless. Frank came up with a beautiful photo that you see on the front. The order of service comes out of magic on your email. And lo and behold, here we are. So I'd like to dedicate these words and today's work together to Pat. As I mentioned, this is based on a book that has informed my work as a nurse practitioner. And this book has come to mind several times as I began to commit myself to helping the important work of growing this congregation. Additionally, the notion of nurturing and gardening seemed like a nice place to rest my thoughts during yet another cold winter week. Who knew last Sunday that we would be approaching the 13th storm of our winter today? The book Aging Well is the result of a longitudinal study on aging from the Harvard Study of Adult Development. The author, George Vaillant, is a physician and its third lead researcher. He since 1967. And it is a study that has been in progress since the 1930s. This study has followed 3 cohorts of subjects for the better part of 80 years. And were it a different day, and were our hearts not so heavy, I would tell you more about that study as it illuminates the rest of what I want to read. But I think today we'll save that for another day. The details of the research that inform my thinking are from chapter 12, that is about positive aging and gardening. These words are Dr. Vaillant's. Change is not always easy for the old. Now, I think pretty much it's not such a walk in the park for any of us. Thus, a wonderful quality shared by trees, azalea bushes, and perennials is that unlike bifocals, they will stay where you put them. Pussycats and car keys are not like that. When old, one needs to be able to leave things behind and have them take care of themselves. That is so you can leave suddenly to go to a grandchild's birthday party across the state, or leave lightheartedly to go to a movie, or leave unexpectedly to go to the hospital. Gardens can look after themselves. Dogs, potted plants, and children, even to a surprisingly advanced age, are not like that. Gardens take work, it is true, but not work that requires a sprint, rather work that can be done slowly. Gardens provide wonder and joy. So do children, but to raise a child, you have to be able to run. And you can't go south for the winter and leave them behind. Gardens never need to be chased, and they are tolerant of being left alone under snow. Thank goodness for this year. Golfing is a little like gardening. Each hole is the first day of the rest of your life. With golf, you don't have to run, and golf stays with you when you want to go south for the winter. But gardens supply more wonder and joy than golf, and much less self-recrimination. Gardens allow you to take your stroke over again, and gardening can provide solace even if and when your partner dies. Gardens, like Sophocles, understand the metaphor of the resurrection, just as they also understand that the seeds of love must be eternally sown. When we die, gardens live on after us. There is a kind of immortality about gardens, at least until next spring, and maybe the spring after that. In a nursing home or hospital, it is a joy to be brought flowers from one's own garden. Even a photograph of one's garden, a decade out of date, is still heartwarming. But an old putter sitting in the corner, or that golf ball you sank 5 years ago for a senior tournament's winning birdie, means very little. True, the memory of the hole-in-one, or the dew still on the April fairway, or the memory of the dogwoods blooming beside the second tee can still be a joy. But as you see, my mind's eye has wandered again from golf to gardens. Indeed, the best thing about golf may be that it is played on an 18-hole garden. Again, gardens remind the old that although happiness is harder to come by in old age, joy remains. The old man gets up in the morning. He is not happy with the nagging ache in his knee, nor the sagging pot around his middle, nor the persistent wagging tremor in his hand. But then suddenly, outside the window, is his garden. God's work as much as his own, and he feels joy. Peter Raven, the director of the Missouri Botanical Gardens, put it beautifully when he stated in a Time magazine interview, "We have relatively short lives, and yet by preserving the world in a condition that is worthy of us, we win a kind of immortality. We become stewards of what the world is." Gardeners? He was asked. Gardeners, he confirmed. And so in old age, gardening becomes both a model and a metaphor for our waning lives. Good gardeners are by definition generative. With age, they become repositories of gardening lore. We have some of them in this congregation. And in November, they understand integrity. Gardeners do not mourn the roses and tomatoes that are past. With satisfaction and relative good cheer, they cover their dormant perennials with leaves, confident that in the future they will rise again. E.B. White described his wife Catherine in her final years, the small hunched-over figure, her studied absorption in the implausible notion that there would yet be another spring, sitting here with her detailed garden chart in the dying October light, calmly planning her garden's resurrection. Thus, perhaps successful aging is most akin to successful fall gardening, completing the harvest and tenderly putting the garden to bed for the winter. True, we should steel ourselves to the fact that the final 1 to 2% of our life may not be much fun. Many of us bore witness to that with Pat in the past few weeks. But always successful living means understanding that death is a part of the journey. Here before you, on the bottom, are 2 planters I bought for us, and I filled them with potting soil. As they are now, I believe they represent our congregation. We are fertile ground as individuals and as a congregation. This congregation has a proud Unitarian Universalist history here in Ocean County. There are so many fine people in this room today who have made it so. And there are others who have gone before. And our dear Pat has moved through the part of her life's journey that is called actively dying. All of these individuals have provided fertile ground for what comes next for this congregation. We can decide what we will plant in these containers and who will take a turn watering them and seeing that they get the right light and fertilizer. Perhaps we'll decide to put them outside to share their future beauty with our strip mall community. Perhaps we'll transplant the growing things to our UUOCC garden at Wranglebrook. Or perhaps we'll be more worried that someone might steal them or that they'll die in the hot summer sun. Perhaps many members of the congregation will assume that someone will take care of this fertile soil and that no one will. Perhaps people will defer to someone who knows more about gardening. Or, worst case scenario, we may need to form a committee to take care of them. I sure hope not. May I humbly suggest that each of us think what each of us, could literally add to these containers next Sunday. Perhaps members of the congregation would choose to bring a bulb, or a packet of seeds, or a watering can, or a trowel, or gardening gloves, or fertilizer, or a grow light. Or perhaps someone would write a meditation so we can pray over what does get planted and hope it grows. To grow a congregation from our fertile soil of this existing congregation, we each need to look inside to see what we can do. Not wait until we are asked to do, not defer to someone or some committee who probably knows more, or who would probably do it better, or who has more time, or who's retired, or who has the right skills. This precious garden that Pat leaves this week, this precious garden that is our UUOCC community, its growth is up to each of us every week. Well, I believe to age well is just the same. Our lives up to today are relatively well-contained, fertile soil. So I close with a few questions. What will you leave behind that can take care of itself, even for a while? What will fill your life, the rest of your life, with wonder and joy? What seeds of love will you sow and where? What will live on from your existence and part of the community of UUOCC? Will you become a gardener in your own way, in your own world, as you age well?